We have one last presentation in this frame before our break. We are now welcoming Steve. Steve is with New Relic. Steve's a principal developer relations engineer. I love DevRel people. So Steve not just likes to talk to all sorts of engineers. He loves to tinker with code and also serves as a mentor with the Sydney. I mean, Melbourne's better. Come on, dude. The volunteers program, programmers rather, for Python. So Steve, thank you very much for your time, and please, floor is yours. Would you mind, Steve, terribly, if you can just click that little hide button on the sharing thing? Perfect.
Yeah, cool. Everyone can hear? See all good?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much. I always joke that being the last guy before the actual break, this is going to be tough. I have to bring my A game and make sure I say something very interesting. Anyway, thank you so much for attending the session. I'm actually based in the US right now, so internet might be a bit challenged, but I'll just try to do my best. My name is Steve. I'm a developer relations lead here in New Relic. Effectively, what I do is I spend a lot of time working with engineers, developers, understanding observability, site reliability engineering, but also talk more on the operational side, not just New Relic platform, but also the whole ecosystem. So today, I kind of changed the topic a bit because today I just learned that there's another presenter also talk about this topic, OpenAI GPT-3, which also means the timing is right in this year, 2022, where maybe this could be a good year of start leveraging Open API in your program. But I also want to talk about how do you make sure that it's up and running, because actually building system is relatively straightforward. It's actually the operations, making sure it's working well when you have hundreds of thousands of millions of requests going through an app. That's the tough one. In fact, that's the one that gives engineers a lot of headache. Without further ado, let me just get into it. So the good thing about, for me, having another talk about this particular topic is I wanted to answer this big question that always linger with all of us engineers. Are we there yet with AI? Can I start creating my $1 million or $1 billion startup to disrupt the whole industry with AI so that I can create very new innovative solutions right there? I think we still have a long way, but one thing that I like is at least engineers now are being realistic and actually know the use case where we want to target. What you see right here is what we call the hype cycle. So every year, Gartner actually publish a report roughly on hype cycle in different part of technology within an industry. What you see right here is the hype cycle for artificial intelligence right there. Now, I want to draw your attention right here. Notice the technology curve that what we're seeing is looks like we still need a few more years before what we say we can get into a more widely adopted production grade system that we can actually build system on. In fact, kind of reminds me the days of Docker, Kubernetes, no code platform where people are talking about it, but that's where the opportunity is. Now, I want to draw your attention right here again. I do include the report right here just in case if you want to have a look. But going back again, are we there yet with AI? I think we are. The reason is because we're starting to see some really good services and some well-known company actually build AI services on top of it. I'm going to talk a bit more later on. Now, what I'm showing right here, it looks like I'm having a bit of issue with image coming through. Just bear with me. Okay, cool. Now, what I did right here with my sample code is I actually used Python, which is a very common language, especially in the world of AI. I use OpenAI. Don't worry, we'll talk a bit more what OpenAI is. And what I've did right here is because this is API days. Every developer, our ultimate goal is we don't want to have infrastructure, we don't want to build things, we don't want to manage things. Everything is through an API, but API there's a drawback too, because you're going to rely on network, and therefore with API-driven architecture, there's a lot of unknowns, especially in a network point of view. So what I did right here is you can see some of the examples here on the left-hand side, where I actually use Twilio, the WhatsApp version, the WhatsApp sandbox to actually have a meaningful conversation with the AI right there. What I'm trying to test, and if you ever built AI systems before in the past, you know AI services that offered by different vendors tend to do very well in one particular vertical. That's not bad. That's intended. In fact, that's actually better for engineers because at least we know what we can use that system for. But what really shocked me is the AI system that I saw, especially with the development of OpenAI, is it understood context, it understood intention. Also, I throw a really tricky question at OpenAI is asking the question, what's roti prata versus roti canai, which is a very common term that you hear in Malaysia and Singapore. The AI actually understood it, which I'm like, wow, it's not bad. And the third one that you see right here is I asked a classic question, like what you just gave me that question. Is it Sydney or Melbourne? Is it better? Is it Malaysia or Singapore? Is it better? The AI actually understood my arguments and also opinion about it. I took the next step. This application actually showed to a few real person, people like me, to understand, is this an AI or is it something that's really comprehensible by a human? And what really caught my attention is people actually said, hey, that AI response is actually relatively accurate. Of course, there's an opinion too. So hence, I think 2022 could be a good year that we can start leveraging more AI services into our application stack. Now, there's a second part of this particular presentation here. Yes, we're going to cover on OpenAI GPT, but I'm also going to introduce you a technique that's very useful, especially in API operation and troubleshooting. What I really mean here is tracing. If you're very new to the concept of tracing, what I'm really referring to is distributed tracing. What you see right here is, yes, I can build an application, it's all well, up and running, it's all good. But how do you actually see tracing or traces to be more specific? Traces that occur within a microservices or distributed architecture. What you see right here is an example of an application that instrumented right here, and I'm using tracing as a way to see trace propagation in order to identify which part of the stack, or to be more specific, external request call is that's having a delay. Remember that question that I asked earlier, roti prata or roti canai? Yep, I was able to capture it. In fact, I was able to add context around it. We'll talk a bit more later on what is tracing. So let's go back to the original. How did I learn about OpenAI? I've been actually reading about OpenAI because I used to play games. Nowadays, I've been working so busy I didn't really have time. But back then, I used to play this game called Dota. So Dota stands for Defense of the Ancient. The original game actually came from Warcraft 3, that's by Blizzard. It kind of broke off and created its own game. But what really, really drew my attention is OpenAI. This particular organization actually won the Dota Championship in 2019. It actually talks about how they won, and that's a white paper that's available to you, especially for folks if you're really interested in AI and machine learning. But what really caught my imagination, because if you ever played the game or if you've ever seen it, try to get 5 players to work together. It's really, really hard, in especially using AI to actually do that. Because playing against humans can be very unpredictable. But also the game itself, it's all about skill set, timing, strategy, but also unconventional ways trying to win. And therefore, they really caught my attention right there. Now, what I also kind of learned about OpenAI is Bill Gates, probably one of the most famous tech figure here in tech, the creator of Microsoft, actually said that OpenAI is a major milestone. But look at the one of the what I call the human player, the team lead, Sebastian, actually talk about is what OpenAI is able to do is actually learn and experiment different ways based on what they saw playing games with other humans. The win rate is impressive. If you ever played Dota 2 AI as a human, you probably crush them every time. But this is really, and it really caught my attention when their win rate is 99.4. That's impressive compared to other AI services that I've seen, that offer by different provider. The one that really caught my attention, is GitHub CoPilot. The reason is because for us as engineer, we always dread and fearful the days that AI is going to replace us. But that really caught my attention because GitHub CoPilot is actually built on OpenAI. Yes, yes, we don't want to admit, but we often go to Stack Overflow to actually see what's going. But that really caught my attention. What you see, all the automated code generation, is actually powered by OpenAI. And here's another thing that really caught my attention. You see that particular post right here where Sharif actually talk about using OpenAI GPT. Don't worry, we'll get a bit more later on. Using OpenAI to create a whole React app without actually coding it. It's not great. It's not what I call production or professional developer grade, but it's actually good enough to actually create a functional app, actually React, or you start coding with that. That really caught my attention. So what is OpenAI? So if you're not familiar, OpenAI is actually found by Elon Musk, again, very prominent tech figure in the industry, creator of Tesla and also SpaceX, and also Sam Altman, which is the creator of the Y Combinator startup bootcamp here in San Francisco. What OpenAI is trying to do is actually focus on AI research and deployment, and they want to make sure AI is being used in the right way because AI can be very dangerous. And you probably heard about some articles and people, some news that talk about deep fakes. What they want to do is they want to create open, responsible AI, but they have a very good goal too. They want to democratize AI. And I like the mission statement because they have their autonomy and they're really open about it. And then also they're very cost efficient. It reminds me of Twilio pricing, where per execution is actually charged on that. We'll talk a bit more when we actually go to the page. Their latest offering is called DALI. Now, they try to capitalize and leverage the existing trend and what we see with NFTs. So NFTs is non-fungible token, where people create creative art, they sell into a specific marketplace. And what OpenAI is trying to do is they want to create what we call specialized classical technology art based on the description that what you want to create right there. Talking about efficiency, AI can now even create art for you. It can actually sell on NFT. Pretty impressive. But the one that really, what we call the stable release, especially for us engineers, you want to always work on stable because anything that's beta or new one, sometimes it might break the whole system. But the stable release is called GPT-3, and that's what I actually built my app on. It's actually a natural language process. It uses a lot of neural networks to actually understand the context around it, and it generate a response based on the text that you see right there. So what is the word GPT? GPT stands for General Purpose Transformer, and it's at its third version right there. That's why it's called GPT-3. It's in the third version. It was released back in May 2022. Back then, it was only an invitation, but now it's already open to the public, so you actually can sign up for it. But what really is quite impressive is actually it's actually 175 billion machine learning ANN. Now, this is an impressive number because most applications don't even reach 1 billion or 2 billion. And what I want to draw your attention right here is this part right here. What OpenAI is trying to do is very close to human comprehension. Not entirely, because if you play with the system enough, you can actually notice there's still some issues, but we're getting very close. And especially for folks, if you want to build some very innovative, disruptive services, this is probably a good time. So, as mentioned earlier, why GPT is such a big thing, and there's a lot of people talking about it, especially in the community, because the quality is quite acceptable for once. Because I think AI has been overhyped quite a lot for the past few years. In fact, a lot of people have very got disappointed, me including. But I think right now, as I'm playing myself, we're getting better. But what GPT does really, really well is it's able to actually learn based on unlabeled data. Because for AI to learn, you kind of need to do a lot of tagging, metadata. You have to actually teach the model to actually do through tags and metadata. But GPT is actually learn and actually self-tag by itself over time by going through, in another way, crawl through the whole internet. Now, one thing you need to be mindful of, although OpenAI has the word open, it's not entirely open source. because ultimately someone has to pay the bills. Like, we can't, engineers can't build software for free forever because someone has to pay the bill, like mortgages and feed our family. But one thing that OpenAI GPT right now has quite a significant funding from Microsoft. And therefore, Microsoft has exclusive right to actually build on top GPT, hence going back to GitHub CoPilot. GitHub is also owned by Microsoft. That's why Microsoft is actually to actually build that service on top. But it doesn't mean you can't do it, because there are companies actually can actually build services on GPT. So how do you get started? Getting started is actually pretty easy. If you ever built API-driven services before, like Stripe, Twilio, or OpenAI GPT, it's going to be like so easy for you, because it's just literally a block of code, put in a code, do something. And probably the most prominent company that you see right here is Duolingo, which is actually a translation app. You can see actually they actually can translate services on the fly. But again, going back to GitHub Copilot, that's actually still powered by OpenAI GPT. So now I've been talking a lot, especially in the last session of the event. You probably want to see some things already. Without further ado, let me actually show you some things so that you can go through. And I actually want to show you more of a practitioner, engineer's point of view, some more realistic point of view, and where you actually can build services like that. So first one you want to go is just go to openai.com. Let me just get a sip of water. So what you see with openai.com right here is this is a public page. As mentioned earlier, you actually can see DALL-E, which is the new AI system that actually generate art. How the art is being generated right here, it actually study a lot of historical classic art, and based on the description that you provide, it actually can generate a new form of art based on the description that you put right here. Now, one thing you need to be mindful with DALL-E right here, it is on a wait list. I didn't get that wait list. I'm not special enough, but you can actually give it a try. The concept is pretty impressive because it leveraged, again, going back to the machine learning that it learned during the competition Dota 2, but also using some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier with GPT right there. Now, let's go into documentation. For us engineers, sometimes if we don't want to work on a system, is that if they don't have very good documentation. And I'm very glad to say OpenAI has a lot of good documentation, and you actually can see what you can do right there. First, once you actually register an account, you actually can get an API key. Once you get an API key, it actually has some really good documentation, actually go through and teach you to actually how to build a service. But the one that I feel, that's why there's another presenter that actually talk about OpenAI today. And again, as a practitioner, as a engineer that work a lot with other people, the one that really impressed me is examples. There's a lot of examples for you to actually get it started. It just makes a lot of unknowns, try to figure out with what kind of code, what you can do in the system. Pretty impressive right there. Now, the one that you actually can see, for example, using Python to actually do different things, they actually give you a lot of code sample. And also from a pricing point of view, it's actually quite affordable compared to what other services I've known in the past. And you can see the API request right here. It's really straightforward. And from there, you find an API to a backend API platform, which is OpenAPI GPT. And after that, off you go. There's really nothing you need to do. There's just so many good examples that I found that actually I actually able to build my own services on top of it. Now, before I actually go into my app, I do want to take a moment to talk about Playground. So Playground is actually the playground that I offer here at OpenAPI GPT. You actually can play with it. So for example, right, poem about Singapore. No idea how it's going to look like. We'll figure it out. Let's just see if we can get it back. And this is actually the AI doing the writing right here, straight away on the fly. Think about it. This is actually really quick without actually going through a lot of pre-processing that a lot of AI system would do. Now, let me try another one. What's the difference between, trying to do another tricky question, roti canai and roti prata? Let's try another one. Again, this is on the fly. This is live demo. I didn't actually rehearse anything of this. So it actually knows quite well the difference between the terms in different countries. That's why I say it's really impressive. Now, let me just try again. Which is better, Singapore or Malaysia? Let's do a tough question. Depending where you are, this is going to get very debatable. Okay, let's try. Oh, pretty good. As mentioned, it's picked the middle ground. But that's what I mean right here. That's what I find is really interesting. And what you want to do is you can actually view the code, and there you go. It's pretty straightforward. Based on what you test, just put it in, and from there, that's where you go. Now, going back again, so let me take a moment to actually show you the code sample right here is, so what I do is, based on the code, I actually built a very simple Python program right here. Everything what you see right here is just built in Flask. It's pretty straightforward. The only thing that I want to add right here is I instrumented an AI service. This is not an easy task because when you think about like new technology like blockchain, Web 3.0, NFT, or AI, how do you even instrument it? Once you build that service, how do you make sure that things is up and running? So what I did right here is I use a new Relic Python agent. And what I did is I used application performance monitoring, or APM in short, and I did a code profiling to profile all the systems underneath it right there. And from there, and what I did, I used this thing called distributed tracing. Now, let me just go back into my app again, right here. Let me just do localhost if it's running. If not, I can actually show you later on. Right here, again, this is based on the app. I'm going to generate the name on the fly. Wow, it's pretty good. So give me a name of cat. There you go. This is actually done on the fly. No any model, only any ML model, nothing AI services is being stored on my machine. This is all purely API generated. Especially for guys, if you're watching this, if you're having trouble naming your kid or your next child, this could be a good option. Again, just a joke, but this is really a good one that you should consider with. Now, but I want to get into the most important part, tracing. Especially in API-driven architecture, your service is going to traverse out into the internet or maybe through some form of intranet, especially if you have microservices API internally. So what distributed tracing, or the word tracing, really means is actually you're tagging a request. You're putting some form of data tag to actually say this services came from A to B, B to C, C to D. That's actually how you see trace propagation, and you know which part of your service is actually having a delay. That's what distributed tracing is trying to solve right here. Now, I want to put this disclaimer. You can do this through open source. You can do it through enterprise software too. So open source, it could be something like Open Tracing, Zipkin, and Jaeger. Lately, these two formats being merged into Open Telemetry Tracing. So you can do that too in the world Open Tracing. Just a bit more work because you need to do a lot of work by yourself. Or you can go through enterprise software, like we are one of them, like New Relic. But once this is done well, I want to get to the end result. How does it look like? So going back again with my OpenAI, which I built in Python, I have the API service, but I also have Twilio to actually communicate and actually send the message out. Once this is done correctly, you start to see some really powerful visualization, and you actually can pinpoint exactly where the issue is right here. So here, if you remember my application that I shown you earlier, I actually communicate out into OpenAPI and also to Twilio. But what I can do right here is actually pinpoint exactly which part of the service or the external call is having a delay. This is so important, especially if you move to distributed architecture, microservices, your heavy reliance API services. You need to understand which part of the service is actually having a delay. So going back again, I can see most of the time it's actually an open API, which is actually not bad because it's actually trying to process the data. But also going back right here, is I can see my average response time, my throughput, my histogram, but also I actually can see the attribute right here. So here's an example of the API response that I asked so far. Hey, what is Luxa? It actually able to give me that response right there. And actually can see which part of the service is quite bad. Now, why this is important again? Because if you ever built services before, most people tend to look on the infrastructure side. CPU, memory storage, maybe latency, maybe error rate, but people don't have context. People don't actually know when I click on a specific request and stuff, which user ID, which transaction ID, which customer. That's what I'm really referring about, context right here. So what I tend to do here, right here, is New Relic essentially give a lot of customers a lot of advice on actually adding context to their tracing.
Hey, Steve.
Yep.
We are at time.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if I caught you at the right moment or if you've got more to go.
No, all good. I'm already on my summary page. Perfect. Well, I'm
Do you
just going
want
to
do
go
you want
straight
to take
into it.
30 seconds to wrap up, or?
Yeah, let me just wrap it up.
Sure.
So how did I instrument an AI service and open for Q&A? So first, I just added a supported language support. I added an instrumentation library. As mentioned earlier, I want to add context so I can see exactly the AI response. And after that, what I did is I introduced you the concept of tracing. Tracing is very, very good, especially in this API days. A lot of people are building services in API. Tracing is a really good technique. If you're interested to understand a bit more underneath the hood, how things are working, if you want to explore a bit more about how tracing works, just feel free to join the technical workshop. I'll go through much detail. You can ask me very deep stuff. Happy to answer the question. Finally, just to wrap it up, we're now on version 3. Version 3 is actually pretty impressive. GPT-4 could be a tipping point. I'm really excited. It might take a few more years, but this could be a good one. One thing I like about OpenAI is I like their goals. It's very transparent. It's very open. I like their autonomy. And it's actually very affordable too. You actually can go to their website and actually see how they do pricing right there. So as mentioned earlier, I don't not only want to talk about service, but I also want to show you as engineers, how do you make sure that service is up and running. So with that, thank you so much. And I'll hand it to you. Just ask me any questions you have.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. Unfortunately, I think we have run out of time, so might skip the Q&A, but thank you very much for this. I was curious how you're going to bring it back to New Relic, and you turned it around at the very end with the tracing. So yeah, I think AI ops is the term I keep hearing bandied about, and I suspect all the things you've shown us connected to observability and open telemetry and so forth. It's going to be super fascinating in the next year to longer. So thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.